Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today is December 16th, and this is another of our bi-weekly SIG CLI calls. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. We have a pretty light agenda, so let's get to it right away. First of all, big congratulations and shout outs to Brian, Zhao, and Siam. This trio got the community awards during last week's contributors award show, basically. So thank you very much for all your hard work, your input, your time that you spend on reviewing and improving kubectl is invaluable. Thank you very much, and you totally deserve these rewards. Another announcement is that December 30th, which is basically in 2 weeks, is canceled. I'm pretty sure that the majority of us will be busy thinking about New Year's Eve rather than interested in working on SIG CLI related stuff. But we'll see each other right after the New Year's. If I check correctly, January 13th is the next goal when we will be having. So I guess that all when it comes to announcements. Introductions. Do we have anyone new to this call? I'm looking through the list and I think I recall all of the names, but if you're new, feel free to speak up.
Hi, I'm Sulabh, joining for the first time. Seeing out, I wanted to, so I work for Apple, recently joined them. I'm looking forward to do some contributions in SIG CLI. I'm an SRE, so that naturally interests my, come to the productivity and more here to improve my Golang and contribute to the community in a way I can. So happy to join and happy to contribute, looking forward. Thanks.
Awesome, welcome. Okay, hearing none, then we can jump over to the topics. The first one was we shortly started talking about it last time, but we decided to push it over to this time since that requires a bigger discussion. I remember, Sean, since Tim asked you in the first place, I'll let you talk about the proposal.
Sure. As I mentioned before, normally don't bring Twitter into the meeting, but this was, this is Tim Hawken asking. They were having a thread, which is linked here, asking about whether or not what could be done to keep users from running containers as root. And one of the suggestions was that maybe the output from kube control would be a different color, say red. And so I thought, because this is Tim Hawken, that it may be useful to at least consider it and see what the rest of the community thinks. So I know we've already discussed colorizing the output, colorizing all output. And so this, so for that reason, it also seemed like a topical.
This is a follow-up on
area
last
to-
week, right? Like we already
Correct.
started this discussion. Okay, and so is this like, has progress happened since last week, or are we just starting the discussion where it left off?
Yeah, I don't think we came to any conclusions, if I recall correctly.
We were close to the end of the meeting, and we wanted to discuss this more in depth, so we moved it over to the next call.
Like maybe the best way to proceed is someone writes a proposal, or those that are interested in having input in the solution, write a proposal for how we could make this better. There's probably a couple different possibilities, from writing a log message to standard error to colorizing the output to something else.
And I think that there's also a link to a colorizing plugin. Is that correct? With KubeColor?
Yeah, that's yeah, and I think there's that discussion as well, and these should definitely be talked about together, but probably also don't want to, like, we we probably don't need to lock ourselves in. Like, for instance, we could do the logging to standard error message without blocking on color and add color later or something like that. I know there's discussion about what the color should be, because some colors are more distinguishable from each other than others, that sort of thing.
I mean, there are several options, basically. First of all, there are, okay, let me go back. Coloring is very personal preference. And this probably goes back to Doc's proposal about having a configuration directory, and we could probably have some options around coloring, which would include both picking the right colors and matching the colors with the theme of your terminal, because there are people that prefer darker colors and others prefer lighter colors. So that's one angle, and a general approach that I personally think that should be approached in the first place. Secondly, the question is about how much coloring we actually want to implement in Get, for starters, but I'm guessing that this will also apply across the board to be consistent. So whether we're coloring just single columns, whether we're coloring the entire rows or particular elements of the output, I'm pretty sure that we won't be able to satisfy all. And there will be as many opinions about what should be colored and how should be colored, as many people will be commenting on the particular proposal. So I'm wondering, what would be the best approach?
I mean, we could maybe start out with just a lint command. I imagine that the category of things that we may want to guide the average user towards doesn't end at security, and doesn't end at like this particular security issue. And they may want like an automated, like much like there's GoLint and such, like running as part of their CI/CD pipeline. Like coloring actually wouldn't necessarily resolve that. So a linter may be the simplest approach to start out with.
What do you mean by linter?
I mean, like, so somehow we're detecting this, right? Like, based on the static analysis of the configuration. So if you run like kubecontrol lint and then give it either a -f, you give it configuration, or give it the pod or whatever, it reads the configuration and then exits non-zero if it's running as root and prints to standard error or standard out, whatever the Go linters do. The in message for each item that doesn't pass linting. And potentially we could add like sort of like the Golang CI lint file where you could probably enable and disable different linters and configure them so that you can, as part of your GitOps pipeline, enforce certain things before it hits OPA or something like that. Or no, is it? what's the open policy agent? Yeah, that's right. Open policy agent.
So you would basically separate the coloring of kubectl output as a separate topic, and in parallel solve the problem of linting, because like you probably said, different people will be looking at different things in their cluster. So yeah, I think that would be a reasonable approach.
I know Ahmet has, I think, explored doing linters. This is something we've explored in the past. But anyway, we've spent about 15 minutes on this. I'd be happy to engage in a deeper discussion about the technical merits of different approaches here. I think this might be, some items might come out of this that would be great for new contributors to pick up, and that we could direct the work on. Some of the things will be easier than others. Maybe we could schedule, like Sean, maybe you could lead point on just like organizing the effort, not necessarily taking on all the technical pieces, but set up a separate meeting or doc or discussion for us to collaborate on in this issue.
Yeah, I'll organize that, and I'll quickly off the top of my head suggest minutes after our meeting, just so we don't have to try to find a separate time. So it would be like 10:15, 10 to 10:15. And I'll organize this offline, and yep, we can move on to the next one, I think.
Sounds
Yeah,
great.
perfect. Try syncing with Ahmed if Phil mentioned that he was looking at it. Maybe he has some kind of a proof of concept or some initial sketches around how this could look like. I'm knowing how Ahmed approaches topics, I'm pretty sure that his input on the topic might be valuable.
Moving on, open API
Cool.
features and customize slides.
Yes, do you mind if I share my screen so I can?
Sure, let me add you as a co-host and you will be able, and let me stop sharing. Okay, you should be able to share.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just like a really short presentation on some open API features and Kustomize. So the background for this proposal is that Kustomize currently uses Kubernetes open API data to get all of its information about resource types, and it needs that data to do strategic merging. And the Kubernetes open API schema is hard-coded into the Kustomize binary in the KYAML library. So this is a problem for custom resources because the built-in schema only has information about built-in types. So Kustomize doesn't handle custom resources correctly. So here's an example. It's based on an actual like user issue that's currently open. So on the left, I have my custom resource. And on the right, I have a customization file with a patch. And what I want to do with this patch is just change the container image to Nginx. So I'll let you guys look at this for a second. But it doesn't do what we want. So the desired output is on the left, where what we want is just the image to be changed to Nginx because the patch should be merged with the resource. But instead of merging together, it just completely overwrites the entire container field. So our proposed solution is to allow users to specify their own OpenAPI schema files via an OpenAPI field in the customization where they can put a path to their schema. And that schema should contain all the necessary information for that custom resource. So as a user, what I would have to do is first apply my custom resource to my cluster. Then I would have to get the OpenAPI data from that cluster and put it in a file. And this will contain the schema information for my custom resource. And then I can change anything about the schema that I want and then put that in my customization. And yeah, that's the entire proposal. Are there questions, comments?
This makes sense. It might already be supported and it might not. I trust that you dug in and there's no obvious way of doing it. It'd probably be hidden through some weird environment variable if it was supported. The intent was to always provide this capability. So if it's not there, then adding it makes sense to me. It should be a relatively minimal change. The biggest, I think probably the most challenging aspect of this is going to be the like bases, like recursive traversal, and like having conflicting open API definitions between some base you use and it has defines open API definitions, and then the parent defines its own, and this should get merged properly, but it's possible it could conflict.
So I have a question
Yes.
about the fetch open API data from cluster. Can we have it can be an option within the customize file or an option to customize as a flag during invocation to force it to read the open API data from the cluster instead of from a file?
So we've talked about this, and I think the problem with that is we want everything to be specified in the customization file so that it can be checked into source control. Like the output of customized build shouldn't depend on your current cluster. If that makes sense.
It should be like a reproducible build, right? Is the idea. If you have the same input files, you should get the same outputs.
Yeah, right. In general, Customize doesn't talk to any servers. It's a client-side tool sort of running out of band, and everything's checked in, and exactly, it's reproducible builds.
You could totally have a customized like edit, like get schema subcommand, right? That you gave it a CRD, it sends the CRD to the API server, gets the open API schema, writes it to a file, then edits the customization YAML to, add that, and then check it in.
Okay, that's fair. I was just curious because there's one other question that I have. I remember that I struggled with that in the past as well. Can you go back to the example that you had? I don't know, that was like 4th or 5th slide. Yeah, I think it was previous one still. The problem with that was about merging the arrays or maps if they don't contain a proper information about what's the key that they should be looking after. But I'm guessing that that's already expressed in the Open API, and that's the only missing bits that.
Yes, the Open API data has 2 variables called patch strategy and merge key.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, find us. Yeah.
So funny enough, I actually started working on a kubectl schema command that will let you get the Open API schema to standard out, and it will also print out the JSON schema version of that because they're apparently very different and used for different tools. So this is motivation for me to keep working on that.
Good.
Cool. Are there any other questions for Natasha about the Open API in Kustomize? Questions, suggestions? Okay, hearing none. And
so the next steps there, right, are to create a KEP that kind of says what the API changes are.
Okay, so this is okay.
And then we'd probably go, nitpick on, I don't know, this should be capitalized or something like that, and then move forward with the code changes.
Yeah,
once.
that's right. Would you be willing to review that kept?
Yeah, I'd be
Or
happy,
that kept?
happy to review that cap as long as it's pinged to me on Slack instead of through a GitHub notification that I will never see.
Got it.
Okay, cool. Eddie, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Okay, cool. Eddie, you had the 2 issues from last blocker bug. You want to talk about them?
I think let's do Katrina's first.
Isn't that about the cap that just Phil mentioned?
No.
Okay,
different
sorry.
cap.
I thought about that one, that this is connected. Sorry,
Oh,
Katrina, go ahead.
This is just a quick heads up about a different cap that I would like to submit probably in early January. Internally, we've been working on a new API, client-side API kind that is based on customized configuration functions. And it's sort of all oriented around customized plugins. And we are building it entirely with customized primitives. So we thought that this could actually be a really useful thing for the community as well. And we wanted to get community feedback on it and see if there's interest in having us upstream it. So we are working on the KEP right now and just wanted to give everyone a heads up that we'll be opening that in early January, and so that it's not coming out of the blue, and happy to answer any questions about it.
Do you have a, I don't know, some kind of a proposal or something written down about what it will look like that we can link in the agenda for others that will be interested in looking into it?
Well, we will be opening like a full KEP with all the details. So
Okay.
I could, yeah, that will probably be early January when we have that.
Why
Yeah,
don't we
that's fair.
follow up? Why don't we like update the notes with the link to the cap when it's published?
We'll do.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, we can just mention that during the next call or whenever the cap will be up.
Okay.
Awesome.
I think the idea was the point of mentioning it before it's there is like before we write up this long cap that talks about like going from alpha to beta to GA, and testing and like all this stuff, right? Folks who would be interested, we could probably just like have a like reach out if this is of interest to you, and then we can include you in the collaboration process like as early on as possible.
Okay.
So these 2 came up during Bug Scrub. They're both kind of related. So TLDR of this issue that we need to talk about is we currently use a kind list inside of kubectl to represent a mixed resource type list. This was apparently never supposed to be exposed to external users. And so I talked to API Machinery a week or 2 ago, and yeah, so they never intended for this to be used externally, but it is. And it's used in many different places, including Helm, and there's a couple other links on there. So we just need to have a discussion about what do we do here? Do we document this? Do we come up with a different official mixed list type? Floor is open.
So I was present on the SIG API Machinery call, and the proposal that came from Daniel that seems most reasonable is returning a proper YAM or JSON list of resources. The only reason that we currently wrap the resources in the list is because, so if you normally ask for list of pods directly to the API, in return, you'll not get a list resource, but you'll get a pod list resource with items being pods. kubectl allows going a step further, and you are able to retrieve pods, services, or and other resources within a single query or a single command. Under the covers, kubectl actually invokes that many get calls, as many resources you pass, and then combines those into a big list. And for that reason, we are using the list kind, the generic one. I'm guessing that this goes back to the very early days when kubectl was working against the internal types, and we just apparently missed that one when we were externalizing the entire kubectl. So obviously, this is a breaking change. So if we decide, and that's probably my proposal for today, to go with a plain YUM or JSON list, that will have to be properly documented, and it will, as usual, be behind a flag. And after a couple of releases, we will flip the flags, and eventually, in a couple more releases, we would remove the old behavior that we currently have.
I just verified, Mache. Even if you just do get pods, it still gives you a kind list, not a pod list.
Yeah. What I meant is if you do a row get to the cluster returns you as a resource. It will return you the pod list resource. kubectl always wraps those into the generic list. Sorry if I wasn't concrete enough about that one.
There's like the Go struct, right, which is a pod list. And then there's like the actual API definition that one could theoretically implement in another language like Java, right? So Mache, is there an API concept of pod list? Like, do we have that anywhere in the Open API that says pod list instead of list? Okay.
Yeah. So if you do a get, but not a kubectl get, but like a plain get against pods from the API server, the response will be pod list with pods being the items. And that applies to every single resource. When we are defining the types, there's always a single resource type, such as pod, and an accompanying list type, which is, for pod, it's a pod list, which basically embeds item list. This applies, and I'm pretty sure that if you do explain on the pod list, that should actually work just fine. And I'm actually can quickly check this one up.
I have a quick question while you're looking that up, Mache. So apparently we didn't run into a problem with our moving code to staging. A lot of what we did when we moved the code to staging was to remove internal types. But this internal type, the list, apparently we didn't have to. It seems interesting that that particular one didn't have to be removed.
Hey, heads up, I'm going to have to do a presentation in a few minutes. Short, 5 minutes. Right? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all I had.
So officially, the problem boils down to the fact that you cannot explain the list type. I just double checked. If you do kubectl explain pod list, you will get information that pod list is a list of pods, and there is the information about fields, which is API version, items, kind, metadata. So which is the usual things you would expect from any other resource. The problem with pure list is that it does live in, if I remember correctly, core v1. So theoretically, there is an API, but it's not being explainable because I'm pretty sure that we don't produce open API for it. And this is why Eddie was reaching out to SIG API machinery, because maybe that was a missing bit on their side, that the V1 list is not being exposed. But it turns out that it was never meant for public consumption. For public consumption, the API folks imagine the pod list or your resource list. And this is how the entire API machinery works. A simple approach that we could work with just right away is documenting that this is the way how kubectl works these days, and either have an additional option which will flatten the list to always return YAML or JSON lists, or work with the current one, or if we think that it's reasonable to do, we can just go all the way to change the current list representation. I'm honestly fine with either approach.
Let's just document that discussion. Like, I think for the immediate term, if the request is what is, like, I want to find what this thing is, if we say, hey, this is mostly an internal concept, it maps to these other things, then we can decide if, like, we need to do additional follow-up work.
Fair. Eddie, can you take the follow-up to document this one? Or I'm not sure if the author of the issue is interested in adding kubectl bits of docs around this topic.
I'm hesitant to document a internal type like that. It was never meant to be used externally. I think we should, let's bring up the next GitHub issue, because these are moderately related. So kubectl is using 4 more memory than expected. We're talking gigabytes of gigabytes. There's a bit to read here. The reporter did a bunch of testing. This may be related to the way we merge everything into a kind list.
A TLDR. I now recalled why I wanted to go with the plain YAML list. The TLDR for this issue is the original author did a get across all namespaces for pods, which in a reasonably sized cluster can be pretty big. And the problem with that is kubectl, even though it requests resources in chunks, and the default chunk size is 300 or 500, I can't remember off the top of my head. The thing is, at the end of the day, kubectl will try to put all of the pods into a single list resource, the unfortunate list resource that we just talked about, which with big numbers of pods can be both memory and CPU consuming. The proposal from the author was that he would want to see kubectl get pods, spit the data as it is being read from the cluster. So for example, if you have about, I don't know, couple thousand pods in your return, it would expect that kubectl get pods would spit the data per each chunk that you can also tweak. If we would stay with the current list, that would not necessarily be possible, because you need to create the entire resource as is to be able to spit it out. If we would go with the approach of returning flat list, or the default YAML list, JSON list, we would be able to write the resources as we see them coming from the server. Does that make sense? So we would be able to go down with the memory usage during such an extensive commands. Obviously, one can argue that doing a get pods across all namespaces, if you know that there's a couple or more thousand of resources being returned, is a little bit excessive, but still it's something that we should consider, because I'm pretty sure that it's perfectly a valid use case for some people to expect this to work in a reasonable manner.
Yeah, you're refreshing my memory on this. Thank you, Maciej. The actual issue is that it is reportedly 70 times as much memory as the actual output should be. I think that was the big concern here.
Yeah, I'm guessing this also includes the fact that the output we're getting from the server is JSON. So we do, oh no, he's requesting JSON. But I'm pretty sure that we do some kind of a conversions on the fly to be able to get
70 seems like a lot. Like what, like I do know, like we store both the live object, I think, I guess it like was it the resource builder? I know may store multiple objects of versions of the object and that sort of stuff.
It's 70 times from YAML and 3 times from JSON, if I'm reading what he wrote correctly. So yeah, so the big thing looks like the YAML serialization there.
So it might be worth doing a benchmark on the YAML serialization library and see, like, if you read a 100 byte YAML file, how big is that? How big is that in Go, or 100K? We could probably the simplest way of debugging this is do like a git on, like, reproduce it, write that to a file, and then just write, you know, different serialization, use different serialization libraries to measure how much memory it takes up.
Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
That's all.
I mean, on one hand, the serialization is a potential issue. But then even if we fix the serialization part with big size request, this still has the problem of combining all the resources into a single list, and only then printing that, instead of being capable of returning those as we go.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's probably both need, like 70 time blow up seems like it's enough that it warrants a little bit looking into. But you're right, like it would be much more elegant to stream the resources as we read them. That'll mean, like, if there's anything we do that requires like sorting or filtering or these sort of stuff, that won't work. But
yeah, I mean, the moment, if you care, and he was basically getting those resources into a JSON, so I'm not 100% sure how much sorting we actually support with JSON or YUM output. I'm not entirely sure if that works, because the sorting might be implemented only for the table, for the tabled output. But yeah, especially that the kubectl get retrieves the resources in chunks, so it seems natural to also write them in chunks the way we read them.
Do we have time? Like, is someone going to actually take this issue on? Like, we could put a new contributor label on it and record our discussion, kind of the steps there. But like, is like, Mache, Sean, is this like enough of a priority that you see this being staffed in the next 3 months?
Yeah, I don't have the resources to staff it personally. I'm more than happy to help anyone that is interested in working on this topic. Go through the entire process of submitting and reviewing those whenever whenever one is interested in doing so.
So as a starter project, it'd really be great for somebody to write a unit test that reproduced this. And that would establish a regression coverage so that we didn't get any kind of, so we understood what was happening with the memory usage here. So like, even without even understanding the internals, you could write a unit test to reproduce this work. And that could be appropriate for somebody who's sort of getting started in the code base.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
So let's put a new contributor label on this, maybe record the state and suggest to the author that if they're interested in, it seems like they've done quite a bit of digging into this, and so we're interested in working with them to get it fixed if they want to take ownership of it.
How does it work if I do a dash watch? Would it not have this problem, do you suspect?
Which
No.
is no.
Because it doesn't have all the resources up front. So it has to print them as it goes.
It might be if somebody's searching for a short-term solution, they could always just switch dash watch, and do a kill on their own or something. But
I mean, there are possible options. Obviously, if you're doing get pods across all your namespaces, there are options. If I would be doing something like that, I would probably think about doing this manually with client Go. If you're doing that, I don't know, for backup or for exporting and working with the data, because I'm assuming that he's getting all to work with the data further. So I would probably just include the get part in the piece of code that is transforming the data. So yes, there are options, and they are not that hard. I think it's more about trying to figure out what we could do with regards to improving kubectl.
Sorry to throw another issue in here, but I just linked one in chat. I put it below there too. So this is an old one. So we don't actually stream the results. We just get them in chunks. So these are all very, very closely related.
Okay, you link the two together, at least. That's fair. I would probably close one of the two as a duplicate of the other. I'll leave that one to you, and then we can just ask the author if he's interested in working on it. If not, we can just leave it open until someone is, or some of us has the time to be able to pick it up. The work is reasonably simple. The timing is a little bit more demanding, because if we will be rolling this out as a default, it will require at least 3-4 releases to get it done. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this one?
How should we close the loop with the kind list stuff then?
I would still document this, because even if we would roll the change, like I said, rolling the change will require some time, because it is changing the defaults. and that requires time. So we have to document this properly for our current users until we roll the change. So both documentation, because that's a simple and something that we can get right away, and probably include it in 120 docs. And then starting from 121, we will work on, if we have someone interested, we will work on a solution. Does that make sense, Eddie?
It does. So we won't be able to document this in the API reference because that's automatically generated. Yeah. So where do we want that documentation to live? In our new Kube SIG CLI docs?
Yeah. Probably are close by the kubectl get command.
Okay.
And I'll try to write down the steps either today or rather tomorrow in one of the other issues. We'll probably close in one of them. I don't know. I'll leave that one to you, Eddie. And I'll leave the necessary steps. What is the decision that we've made today? How to proceed further with this one. Okay.
Thank you, Eddie. Again, our tireless champion for the users.
Definitely. Okay, we still have about 10 minutes left, so I'll give some place for Jeff and Nick to talk about Kustomize and CLI.
Thanks much, Ed. Okay, so last week we released 2 versions of Kustomize on 2 different release branches. The version V, the version 3.8 branch depends on API machinery code. That cannot be used in kubectl because of the way kubectl is currently built and shipped. We also have the version 3.9 branch. That uses no API machinery code. And it's based on Kubernetes specific enhancements to the base Go YAML libraries that are used everywhere. So this is the version that we want to bring back into kubectl. The only difference between these 2 branches is the default value of a command line flag. So unfortunately, early adopters found bugs in 3.9, which is sort of working as intended. That's why we're going to the effort of maintaining these 2 different branches. We realized we missed some cases in our unit tests. So I'm working on fixing those this week, and hopefully we'll come out with 3.91 early next week. So summary, we're releasing 2 branches. They're identical. They only differ in the value of a Boolean flag. So the goal is to target 1.21 for reintegration with the kubectl, and that will be taken from the 3.9 branch. We'll probably introduce a new 4.0 branch at that point. So January, hopefully. Anybody know what the code freeze is going to be for 121?
I haven't seen the date for 121 yet. I'm not sure if anything was up, but I can probably check it out. No, there's nothing yet. So I'm guessing that it will happen starting from January. So the freeze will be, usually it's about 6 weeks. So probably mid-February, towards the end of February, I guess.
Yeah.
I have a question, Jeff, about the Boolean flag that you mentioned, that the 3.9 has a change versus 3.8 because of the mishap. Does this flag exist in the current version of Kustomize that we have in kubectl? I'm asking when we will include. Okay, that's cool. That's probably the most important thing, that we're not changing the behavior in kubectl. Cool, that's awesome.
All right, that's it. That's
cool.
the update.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for the update. Nick.
Yeah, so I'll keep this short. Just a few quick updates. I know it's been a while since I gave any status updates. We got a request from a couple of users for a Linux ARM build. So that's a big enough thing now. So that's, as of a couple releases back, we're now distributing for 4 platforms, including Linux ARM now. The second is we recently released 9.3.0. You can check out the release notes. There's actually quite a few sort of minor, but I think pretty important UI enhancements, including now you can very quickly switch between clusters and namespaces just at a click with a single click. Previously, there was a couple of steps you had to go through to jump through to change those contexts. So those are all in the release notes I can point you to. Behind the scenes, we've had some conversations with Mache to sort of finalize the repo migration. So I just wanted to get that out there in case there's any last words about, what we should do or how we should do it. Mache and I have been working behind the scenes to make that happen. So the hope is that we can go from the IBM hosted repo to having something underneath the, I guess it's the Kube enhancements.
Kubernetes SIGs.
Kubernetes SIGs. So anyway, if you want to participate or guide or have any feedback on that, let me know. If you have any objections, let us know. Otherwise, we'll proceed with that.
Okay, cool.
That's what I got. Thanks.
Great update, Nick. Thanks. Is anyone else that I want to share some updates or bring some topic to others' attention? Okay, hearing none, I'll give you back 5 minutes of your time. Thank you very much. Have a great end of the year, and see you all in 2021. Thank you all. Bye.
Cheers.
Happy New Year.